Hello folks, welcome back to the Wikipedia world, and I am Abhinay Gupta. So today we'll continue with the amendments in the company law. In our previous lectures, we have already covered the amendments that were relating to your Section 8 companies. Remember them? The Section 8 companies are the not-for-profit companies, basically. And you had somewhere around 13 to 14 amendments. There were 13 to 14 sections that were amended or for which the exemptions were granted. Specifically, if we talk about it, there were exemptions, right, that were given to the Section 8 companies. And also what we analyzed in that is that they had a one-liner exemption, the exemption that was relating to the applicability and the non-applicability. So it is very rare that you will have a 4-mark question, an entire full-fledged question on any one of the amendments that was covered in your Section 8 companies, right? Except one or two where you may get a probability, where you may get a question. For example, Section 165, Section 174, right, that dealt with the number of directorship and the quorum for the meeting of the board. These are the basically two sections where you could get a 4-mark question. Otherwise, the question that would come for you would be a general question for any other company, and at the end there would be a line included. What would be your answer if the above company was a Section 8 company? And then you will have to give your answer related to that provision, relating to the exemptions that we have already seen, right? So, do you remember the sections that we had covered? Let us revise those sections. Just the section name, right? We'll just go quick about it, and then we'll start with the exemptions to the private companies. So the sections that we had in our Section 8 companies, the amendments in the sections, they were Section 136, if I'm right, that dealt with the right of member to copy of the audited financial statement. Then we had Section 149, the company to have the board of directors. 150, and should we discuss the exemptions too? Okay, that would be a little lengthy, right? So we'll just go with the name of the sections. We had exemption in Section 50, the data bank of independent director. You were not required to maintain it. Section 152, the appointment of directors. Section 160, the right of the person other than retiring director to stand for directorship. Remember, you did not have to pay rupee 1 lakh or something like that. Then you had the number of directorships. Your Section 8 directorship in Section 8 company was not included in the total number of directorship. Then the meeting of the board, the quorum of the board meeting, that is Section 173, 174. Then we had Section 177, the audit committee. You were supposed to make, but again the clause for independent director, the majority should be the independent director. That clause was not applicable, right? Then you had Section 178, NRC and SRC. That entire section was not applicable on Section 8 company. Section 8 company is not required to maintain or to constitute a nomination and remuneration committee. Then you had Section 179, the power of the board, right, where you have seen that the 3 powers that were allowed to be delegated, the borrowing of money, investing of funds and those things, right? You remember, you were allowed to delegate them in Section 179. So those powers can also be, the board can actually go about with those powers outside the board meeting, that is by resolution, by circulation also. But specifically for Section 8 companies, they need not call a board meeting for those 3 specific powers, right? Then we had Section 188, the related party transactions. Section 184, disclosure of interest by directors. And Section 189, the register of contracts or arrangements in which the directors were interested, right? So those were the sections that were covered in your Section 8 companies, those exemptions, those amendments. Now we move ahead to the exemptions to the private companies. And the exemption notification, GSR 464E, right, dated 5th June 2015. So that notification provided certain exemptions to the private companies. I think we have somewhere around 7 to 8 exemptions, right? So let's start with it. Let's deal with that. So first of all, as a procedure, we go ahead. We'll first look at the sections in which you have been given an amendment or an exemption to the private company, right? So those sections are Section 2, subsection 76. This is actually the definition to the related party, right? So for the private companies, the definition of related party has also been amended, right? We'll see in detail how the section goes about, what are the exemptions given. Then you had section 160, right of person other than the retiring director to stand for directorship. Okay. Then section 162, appointment of directors to be voted individually. Section 180, the restrictions on the power of the board, the restrictions that are applied by the shareholders. Then you have section 184, disclosure of interest by the directors. Then section 185, loans to director. Section 188, the related party transaction. We had an exemption in the definition too. Section 276 we have seen, and now we have also seen that there is an exemption in section 188, the related party transactions, right? Then we have section 196 that deals with the appointment of the managing director, whole-time director, and the manager. And finally we have section 141 3G, ceiling limit on the number of audits. Correct? So in totality we have around 9 sections where you have an exemption given to the private company, and this is according to the notification that was issued in the month of June previous year, in the year 2015. So that is very well applicable for your May 2016 examinations, right? And you know that whenever you get an amendment in your syllabus, that actually becomes very important. You have good amount of questions based on those exemptions. And one more thing that you should note down is, if you refer to the practice manual that has been given to you for your May 16 examinations, the practice manual that is printed and that is applicable for May 2016, right? If you go through the answers in that practice manual, what you find is that even though you are not asked a question directly referring to the exemptions on private company, but still wherever these sections have been mentioned, wherever you have a question on section 160, 162, 80, 84, 85, 88, 96, whatever it is, at the end of the answer there is another paragraph inserted as a note, and in that note it is given that if it was a private company, the section would not be applicable, or it would be applicable with these exemptions. Even though the question has not demanded, the institute has included an additional paragraph, right, which is referring to the amendments, which is referring to the exemptions. So it is recommended, it is not mandatory, but it is a recommendatory process that while you are framing your answers in your examination, right, if you are getting any question based on these sections, please remember to make a note that if the above company was a private company, then certain exemptions would have been given, and these are as follows. Right? Because see, what happens is when your answer sheet is being checked, right, the examiner who is checking your answer sheet has 2 answers in front of him. One is a suggested, or the answers that have been provided to them by the institute, and the other is your copy. And since they have very limited time to check their answers, basically they compare the answers given over there with your answer. They don't have time to go through your answer and understand your point of view. They don't need that. And law is one subject where you don't need any detailed study of the answers. It's just specific bullets. Yeah, this section applicable, not applicable, this is the exemption, this is the limit, this is the penalty, right? So it is a straightforward question, point to point. If they get that point, you get marks. If they don't get that point, you don't get marks. So if they get an additional paragraph in their suggested answer that is relating to the private companies, and they don't find it in your answer, no matter your answer is 100% complete, you may not score full marks. Like, it's a probability. I'm not giving you a sure shot consideration, but yeah, it's a probability that if they don't see it in your answer, they may deduct marks for that, because they don't have time to analyze what was the demand of the question. All they know is that yeah, the institute in the suggested has provided this answer, and in your answer sheet you don't have this point mentioned, so you lose marks over there. Right? So basically it is something that the institute has already given an example, given a hint for, right? The answers that the institute is framing, right? You could even refer to your RTP, what are the type of answers you are getting over there. So, but in your practice manual, I'm sure you can go back and refer to them, that there is a note added, right? So try and mention that note in your answer in your examinations as well, right? So we'll start with section 2 subsection 76, and we'll see what are the exemptions. So before going to the exemption and before going to see the difference, we would first revise what section 276 is. I would not use the word revise basically because we haven't discussed section 276 yet. right? We have discussed the sections that have been in your chapters, and basically those sections were post section 123 because that is your syllabus for your CA final examination. Below 123 are those sections that were applicable for your IPCC examination, right? And we haven't studied the definitions as well, except one or two chapters like the Sarfasi Act. That act was very important, and you get answers on the definitions of that act. So we have discussed the definitions over there. But in basically other chapters in your company law, we did not discuss a lot of definition, right? So let us first discuss the definition of related party transaction as per section 2 subsection 76, and then we'll see what are the exemptions provided to the private company and what is the reason, what is the basis behind that exemption, right? So what are the transactions that you consider to be a related party transaction? So any transaction with a director or his relative. If the company is entering into a transaction with the director of the company or the relative of the director, we would consider that transaction to be a related party transaction. What do we do with related party transaction? We'll discuss at the end. First we'll discuss what are the related party transactions. Next you have any transaction with the key managerial person or his relative. In the first point we have seen the director and relative. Now we see the KMP and relative. Third is transaction with a firm in which your director, your manager or their relative is a partner. So indirectly that firm is related to you. Your director has an interest in that firm, right? Then you have any private company in which your director or your manager is a member or a director. So any director is a Mr. X, right? He is holding a directorship in your company as well as in company ABC. So what happens is, if you get into a contract with ABC, the institute or the act would consider that those contracts are being entered into between two related parties, same ownership, same directorship, right? So what they actually think is that the negotiation would be impacted. There is a biasness in the negotiation, right? The rules, the limits, they are not so stringent. It is a very relaxed provision, very relaxed kind of clause which is entered into the agreement, into the contract, right? So that is why these related party transactions have to be dealt in with a little conscious, right? You have to be cautious while you are dealing with the related party transactions. So next you have any transaction with a public company in which your director or your manager is a director or holds along with his relative more than 2% of its paid up share capital. So you are a company, right? So first we are seeing your relationship with a private company, and now we are seeing your relationship with another public company. No matter you are a private company or a public company, whatever you are. But if you have a relationship with the public company, that means your director is a director in that company. Or if that is not the situation, otherwise also your director holds along with his relative more than 2% shares of the private paid up share capital of that company, then the director would be considered to be interested, and that transaction would be covered under the related party transaction, right? Next we have any body corporate whose board of directors, managing director or manager is accustomed to act in accordance with the advice, direction or instruction of the director or manager. That means your director or manager instructs the board of directors, the MD or the manager of that body corporate, and that board or the MD or the manager acts on the advice given by you, or your advice influences their act, then that transaction would be considered to be a related party transaction, right? Then you have any person on whose advice, the direction or instruction a director or manager is accustomed to act. That means over there in section 6, in clause 6, the above point, you have seen that we are talking about that body corporate whose board acts on your direction, and in the next point number 7, we see the person on whose advice you are acting, like your own company's director or manager is acting, like a person who has an influence on your company. So it's both ways, you having influence on the other having influence on you. Both of them are considered to be relative, right? Next, this is again an important point. If we see the the 2.6 and 7, right, then over there we see that there is an influence, right? You have given them an advice, but if that advice is given to them, if the direction or instruction is given to them in a professional capacity, for example, if you are also a chartered accountant, the director is a chartered accountant, and then as a chartered accountant he has given certain advices on the financial statements, right? So those will not be considered. Otherwise, all the other advices that he's giving, being a director or being a friend or a relative to that person, those will be covered, right? Next you have section the point number 8. Here we talk about a transaction with the holding company. If you are a company XYZ, then the holding of XYZ, the subsidiary of XYZ, and associate company of XYZ, and this associate would include the joint venture, okay, of XYZ. So these are the 4 companies, right? We also consider them as cash. Sometimes we refer them as cash, right? The company, A associate, S subsidiary, H holding, right? These or a subsidiary of the holding company. That means if you have a holding company, the other subsidiary, even that will be your relative, right? The 2 companies that have a common holding company, right? Even that will be covered in this ambit. And finally, you have such other person as may be prescribed by the law from time to time. So here we have seen who are the parties who are related, right? But what are the kinds of transactions that are covered over here, basically? So the transactions that will be covered over here would be if that company is entering into any contract or agreement or any arrangement, right, with respect to either a sale or purchase of any goods or services, disposing of or buying any kind of property, or rendering any services or availing any services, etc., right? So all these kind of transactions would be covered, right? So if you refer to section 188, then any of such transactions that you enter, right, with a related party, that transaction would require an approval, because as we have discussed, those transactions may be a little biased, right? They may not be at an arm length transaction. The regulations, the conditions, or the consideration, any of these things may be impacted, right, in a positive way or a negative way, but that would not be at an arm length price, right, or an arm length condition. So that is what is actually a point of cautious, right? So what the company wants is that if you are entering into a related party transaction, you should pass a resolution in the board meeting, right? That is, you need an approval of the board, but that will not be enough. You will also need an approval of the shareholders, right? So if you are entering into any related party transaction, you need an approval of the board, that is a board resolution plus shareholders approval. But we will not need an special approval for that. We don't need to pass a special resolution. An ordinary resolution would suffice. And basically the approval of the shareholders would be needed if the contract or arrangement that you are entering into, they meet certain conditions which are specified in the rules, right? Which rule? The meeting of the board and its power rule 2014, right? And in accordance with section 118. So those are the conditions. If you satisfy them, you will also have to pass an SR. So basically what you understand is that if there is a related party transaction that the company is entering into, you have to be cautious with the transaction, and there are certain procedures that the Act has defined that will prove you're cautious, right? So if you are passing a board resolution, you're passing a shareholder resolution, that means okay, the transaction is well to go, everybody is aware of it, and everybody agrees to the conditions of the transaction, right? So it is not a biased transaction or a biased contract, right? So that was basically about the related party transaction. But now what we are basically concerned over here, why we are having this class over here, is to understand the exemption that has been given to the private company, and why has that exemption been given, right? So tell me one thing, you know what a private company is. A private company basically is not that large as a listed company or a public company, right? And it is under the private undertaking. There are 2 to 3 directors who are related to each other. Those 2 to 3 people, they come together, they form a company, they themselves become the director and they run the company. They are the shareholders, they are the directors, they are everything. It's a privately owned company, right? So if the company is a privately owned company, then obviously even your holding or subsidiary would be your company or your relative's company, right? Basically that is what happens. If you go to look at the practical scenario, if ABC is a company and ABC are 3 directors of that company, then if they have a holding company, that will be ABC Holding. Maybe that is the name. And again, either you have common directors over there or a related director. Even if you have subsidiaries that way, you go along. So what you do is, since you are operating on a very small scale, you try to share resources also, right? So you may enter into intra-group transactions. What are intra-group transactions? These companies, the holding, subsidiary, associate, JV, subsidiary of the holding, these companies are collectively known as group companies, basically. So you may get into intra-group transactions, right? You may get into transaction with a holding company. You may share the resources, you may share the manpower, right? So day to day, there are many operations that are done collectively also, right? So basically, the majority of transactions that you enter into is with a related party. So it becomes a cumbersome process to every time pass a resolution in the board, pass a resolution in the shareholders meeting. You are the board, you are the shareholder, you are doing the transaction. So even passing that resolution is not a task. There are 3 directors related, and you have your holding, that means your company, or you are sharing resources, and then you need to pass a resolution. Do you ever think the resolution would be kept for hold? No, it is merely a formality. And if you even want the resolution to be passed by the shareholders, even that would be a formality. That would never be at a hold, right? They themselves are the owners, they themselves are the directors, and they themselves need the resolution. So they'll pass it. It is just a cumbersome process, right, that they have to follow. It is just for the formality sake, right? So this provision, basically the other provisions, if you have seen, for example, a transaction with the director, relative, KMP, another firm, any other private company, other public company, these will still be applicable, because if there are 3 directors and there is a transaction with a company in which one director is interested, so there may be a chance that others should know. So why don't we pass a resolution? But if you have your group companies, right, like the last section that we have seen, section 8, that section 8 talks about the group companies, and that is the basically day-to-day operation of the company. You share manpower, you share the resources, right? Because other transactions would be rare, but these are day-to-day operations. So it becomes very cumbersome to get a resolution on the daily basis. Every time you need to share the manpower, you pass a resolution. That is not fair, right? So the exemption that you have been given is from this particular section, right? That is section 2, clause 76, part 8. So this is where you get the exemption, right? So this will not be applicable on private company. Now what will be the effect of that? With this, the transactions between the closely held group private companies would become smoother, right? There will be no cumbersome approval processes, and it would simplify your intra-group transactions. But there is one point to note again. The exemption is provided to the group companies only. The related companies, holding, subsidiary, associate, JV, subsidiary of the holding. So these are actually related company, and there is high probability that you share resources. But what about the public companies and private companies where your director is a director or your manager is a director or relative or something that we have already seen in clause 6 and 7? Public and private. So those companies do not fall into the exemption criteria. So what does that mean? That if you are entering into a transaction with another private company in which your director is a director, that will still be considered as a related party transaction, right? Because that is not a very normal or day-to-day occurrence. That is not your related party, that is not your holding, that is not your subsidiary, that is some other private company in which one of a director is a director. That is it. So those company transaction with those company would be considered as related party transaction, and you will have to pass your board resolutions and shareholders resolution for that. But for the group companies, this provision is not applicable for the private companies. You get an exemption. So now I hope I'm able to make it clear with you. Right now you will remember the exemption as well as you know the applicability, and you know the reason why this has come. It is a very genuine thing that should have come in the very beginning, but since they skipped it, so for convenience purpose they have given it an exemption, right? Because there is no point of keeping a restriction on that. Agreed with me? Right. So we'll try covering some more sections now. Let us move on to the next section, that is section 160. Right of person other than retiring director to stand for directorship. Remember section 160? I'll briefly take you through section 160 again. So if a person has the DIN and if he is eligible to be a director, that person could send a notice to the company, right? And that notice could either be sent by himself or any other member and it would be given in writing, that too 14 days prior to the general meeting, right? But there was one more condition, that along with this notice you will have to deposit a sum of rupees 1 lakh, right? And that would be refundable if you become a director or even if you secure 25% of the vote. Otherwise it would be forfeited by the company and would be the profit of the company, right? And then the company would intimate the notice to the members within 7 days, 7 days before the general meeting, and then the members would put it for voting, right? So that was it, section 1. That is all that section 160 had to say, right? Now what is the exemption? The exemption notification number GSR 464E dated 5th June 2015 says that section 160 shall not apply on private companies. Now what does that mean? So first of all, let us understand, right, what impact did section 160 have on private companies. So we have already discussed what is a private company. Basically, private company is a company where you privately own the company. That means you are 2-3 people together, you're owning the company, running the company, you are the director, you are the members. I'm not going by the definition, I'm just telling you in a layman's term what happens in a private company. Got it? So now if you want a director to come into a private company, it's your company, there are 3 directors, A, B and C, and they have formed a company, ABC Private Limited. Now they had a common friend D and they wanted to bring D onto the board, right? So what is the procedure that they will follow? Either they themselves will send the notice, or they will ask D, okay, send a notice to us, notice to the company, right? And with that notice, please deposit rupees 1 lakh and we'll refund it back to you once you are elected. That is what happens basically, and we will forfeit the money if you are not elected. Do you think this statement would ever come out from the mouth of any director? No, because it is a private company. If you are taking somebody on board, if you are appointing somebody, or if you are actually nominating somebody to be a director, that person will be a director because you have nominated him, you will vote for him, he will be a director. Otherwise no third person, unknown person will come and say, I want to be the director, I want to give the notice. Nobody will do that bullshit now, right? Because they know they will not be elected. Nobody will take any unknown person in his firm, in his company, right? So he knows he will not be elected, so he will not waste his rupees 1 lakh. Right? Nobody has that money to throw away. It's a throwaway kind of a thing. So only when you have planned that the director needs to come in, that is when you go about with appointing a director. And if that is already planned and you know that will be done, so what is the point of depositing rupees 1 lakh? Right? That is the exemption that has been given, that you private company need not follow the procedure of deposit. Because Mr. D needs to send an application, needs to deposit rupees 1 lakh, be elected, and then he would be given back rupees 1 lakh. So is that the only requirement, that you want to route 1 lakh rupee through the company? Okay, that is the only need for that section now. That, okay, let's do it for formality purpose, let us show it routed through our account that you have given it to us and you take it back. So that is not needed, right? So this exemption notification said that this unnecessary process is not needed. So we would give him an exemption. He need not deposit any money, just give a notice, sit for election, get voted, join the board. That is simple as that. It is done, right? So that was a mere formality where you need to rotate rupees 1 lakh through the company's account, and that has been exempted. Agreed with it? Right. So that is all that we'll discuss today. We have taken a lot of time actually discussing the definition, section 276 to subsection 76. So we'll cover up the next sections very quickly in the coming lecture. So until then, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you. Bye bye.